Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. In this episode, we are going to continue our coverage of the ongoing civil war taking place inside of the former state of Ethiopia. So, as we know, the forces of the Tigrayan Defense Forces, in conjunction with elements of the Oromo Liberation Army, are now operating south of Desce, south of Kabalcha. In fact, they have moved south, way south, actually past Kamise, and appear right now as we speak. We can confirm that there are some long-range elements of the Tigrayan Defense Forces, possibly as well as units of the Oromo Liberation Army, operating very, very close to Debre Berhan. And I discussed in our previous video that Debre Sena would probably be a crucial area to prevent further TDF advance, Tigrayan Defense Force, Oromo Liberation Army advance south along the A2 highway. As I believe, if and when the TDF and the Oromo Liberation Army are able to secure Debre Sena, but more importantly, the elevated plateau as they continue west southwest of Debre Sena. Again, this is very, very defendable territory in the type of conflict that we are seeing right now. And if the Amhara regional militias, the Abiy loyalists, are not able to hold on to this territory and utilize this as a defensive position to stop the ongoing advance of the Tigrayan Defense Forces, of the Oromo Liberation Army, then this would probably it was the last hope for the Abiy loyalists and the Ethiopian federal government, as so we some people are still calling it. But again, as you can see, I'm kind of looking towards the west southwest, and it is a very, very defendable area. One of the last defendable areas, because once you move past Debre Sena, again, you are on a fairly flat plateau, basically almost all the way towards Addis Ababa. Now, obviously, there are terrain features and hills, as it is a fairly hilly and mountainous country. But once you start to approach Debre Berhan, it becomes incredibly flat. Now, is that going to be a benefit or a curse for the Tigrayan Defense Forces? Hard to say at this point. Obviously, we know in Western Tigray, it's been a hindrance. Obviously, for a number of reasons, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes, or even several seconds possibly. But again, we are hearing right now that, in fact, elements of the Tigrayan Defense Forces, possibly Oromo Liberation Army, have filtered along the A2 highway, possibly going off-road, and are now operating very close to Debre Berhan. Now, is this going to be a continued rapid advance, quite possibly all the way to the capital, Addis Ababa? Possibly. That could indeed happen. Again, the speed and fluidity of which things are moving right now is indicative of a complete collapse of the forces of the Abiy loyalists, of the federal forces that support Abiy Ahmed and the Prosperity Party. But again, it's difficult to say right now if we're actually seeing a consolidation of forces that would actually be able to seize and control Debre Berhan. Are we looking at possibly bypassing Debre Berhan? As we know, we are starting to see some banditry and Amhara insurgents starting to raise their heads in some of the areas that have been conquered by the Tigrayan Defense Forces. Specifically, we have heard about fighting near Kobo. That seems to be very, very small element engagements. in which we are probably seeing some sort of Fano militia type unit operating within that area. Again, they are, for the most part, they know the terrain, they know the area, and it's very possibly that some of these Fano units kind of went to ground, went into hiding, and in anticipation for the main units of the TDF to continue on south before they started to operate in the type of operations they are currently conducting. Again, lots of banditry is being reported. Obviously, there is a breakdown in law and order inside of the former state of Ethiopia. We are seeing any of the law enforcement apparatuses inside of the state now being used for the war effort and not being utilized for law enforcement operation, such as what is taking place inside of the capital, Addis Ababa. We continue to see the law enforcement agencies that are in Addis Ababa starting to be utilized to hunt down and incarcerate people from the Tigray region who happen to live inside of Addis Ababa. Now, again, these people have committed no crimes. They have done nothing wrong. They simply happen to be from the Tigray region and currently are living in Addis Ababa. And whether they are business owners or they have a job in Addis Ababa, that is why they're there, quite probably, and that is the reason they are being arrested. Again, there is this paranoia that is running through the Abiy Ahmed regime right now that is really trying to look for not just people who are in opposition to the government, but for persons who are not pro-government. So if you are not pro-Abiy, if you are not pro-Prosperity Party, then quite possibly you could be an enemy of the state, and you could be disappeared at some point. But again, that is occurring. We have video proof that is occurring. Many non-governmental agencies that are working inside of Addis Ababa can confirm this is going on. And again, when you start to see the collapse of a state as we are now, the state starts to turn on its own people, and that is exactly what we are seeing at this time. But again, they continue, meaning the Amhara regional militias, what remains of the federal government and the law enforcement entities inside of Addis Ababa continue to recruit, conscript, in the possibility of defending this very large and sprawling city from the advance of the Tigrayan Defense Forces. Will they be successful? It remains to be seen at this point. But again, a very significant and very rapid advance by the Tigrayan Defense Forces continues. Again, it's very difficult to get information out of the region, especially the areas where combat is intense, and then obviously as the TDF continues to move south, the government shuts down telecommunications in those areas, and it's very, very difficult to receive and or transmit information. But again, we're going to keep our eye on the situation and report as soon as we have new information. Again, there is still a very rapid and steady advance of the Tigrayan Defense Forces along multiple routes heading south from Desai and Kambalcha, and all those routes appear to be taking them towards Addis Ababa and obviously some of the other larger towns in the south central Amhara region. Again, I wanted to get back and talk about Western Tigray a little bit. I wanted to talk about the possibility of a new operation in which we could see the TDF advance into Western Tigray and possibly retake Western Tigray from the Amhara regional forces and its Eritrean allies, who have a very, very strong position inside the town of Hemora. So first, why have not the Tigrayan Defense Forces not yet entered western Tigray? Obviously, right now, most of their combat power, meaning the Tigrayan Defense Forces, the combat power of the TDF is focused along the southeastern front. Again, that's ranging down from Weldia, Gashina, and then south of Desse. The next is blocking formations and limited activity inside the Afar region, and obviously there are blocking formations near the Eritrean border as well, in case there is an advance by the Eritrean army or a reinvasion by the Eritrean army into Tigray proper. But as we know, western Tigray can be very, very flat, especially the approaches to Hemora. If we zoom in and we kind of take a look at what the ground looks like, obviously much different than the terrain that we see in the current areas of engagement, such as those around the terrain around Desse and Kombolcha. But again, very flat. Aircraft are able to work better in this area in terms of spotting, advancing forces. It's very dry. It's very sparse. There's not a lot of foliage. Again, very difficult terrain to advance if you are the type of army that the Tigrayan Defense Forces is. Right now, it's mainly a light infantry, foot mobile army with some mechanization, some ability to rapidly transport forces via truck, very few tanks, very few armored vehicles that would be needed for the type of warfare that would occur inside of western Tigray. Again, the Eritreans have tanks, they have armored vehicles, they have mechanization, and again, especially as you start to approach Hemora, those types of weapon systems would become very valuable because they can see for great distances and they can engage targets at great distances because it's very flat land. And again, if you can just imagine a large Tigrayan Defense Force infantry column trying to navigate this great distance with not a lot of supply, not a lot of towns to facilitate the resupply of water and food, and especially water is sparse in this area. And then as you approach Hemora, obviously it continues to be flat, and we know that there are tank positions dug in around Hemora, and that is mainly the Eritrean army. But again, if the Tigrayan Defense Forces were to focus on Western Tigray and bring the full weight of their military capability, could they take Western Tigray? I would say yes. Now, they have not done that yet, again, because if they did take Western Tigray, they would have to utilize a large amount of forces to maintain that hold on Western Tigray. And remember, again, very flat. It would give both the Eritrean armed forces and quite possibly the Abiy loyalists, the federal forces, to utilize its aircraft on targets of opportunity in this very flat terrain. So it would just really, it would be a strategic, both a strategic and tactical mistake to fully occupy and take control of Western Tigray, given the nature of the terrain. And that's really why we are, right now, we do not see the TDF controlling Western Tigray. Now, could that change? Obviously, as we see the federal forces fall apart, as we see the Amhara militia units start to focus on its defending Gondar and other areas inside of the central Amhara region, then obviously forces could be withdrawn from these areas that could create the opportunity for a rapid advance of the Tigrayan Defense Forces into Western Tigray. But again, much of the combat power of the Tigrayan Defense Forces right now is fighting in the Amhara region, attempting to win this war against the Amhara region and the Abiy loyalists. Now, once that is done, and if it comes to a conclusion, then obviously I would say then we would probably start to see operations against Western Tigray and driving out those forces that are in Western Tigray, and quite possibly accountability on the part of the Eritrean state at some point for launching the invasion that it did. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but given what did occur, obviously, if we look back again upon World War II, the Allies did not just hold Germany accountable for its actions. There were the Italians, there were the Hungarians, and there were obviously other nations that supported the Axis. And just like in this war, you have another nation, and that is Eritrea, that helped support some of the atrocities and committed a lot of the atrocities that occurred inside the Tigray region. So again, I would not be surprised if there is a certain element within the Tigrayan Defense Forces that would like to hold Eritrea accountable. Now, will we see that? Difficult to say at this point, but it would not surprise me. So right now, again, the main focus of fighting is now way south of Desse and way south of Kombolcha, and what we're now looking at is an advance towards Debri Burhan, and then possibly an advance upon Addis Ababa itself. Again, the many of the nations of the world right now have intelligence services, and obviously those intelligence services are telling those nations to get their citizens the hell out of Ethiopia because things are going to start getting really bad, and that is why they're doing that, because they know that in all probability the Tigrayan Defense Forces will be knocking on the door of Addis Ababa, quite possibly sooner rather than later. Have a great day, everybody.